Jody, Cassandra, can somebody give me a thumbs up that you can hear us?
I can hear you.
We can hear you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for being here. I see that we have a quorum, so we will get started. Before we begin, I would like to thank all of you for being here and also thank our, we have a new, and I want to acknowledge we have Lisa Larson with the Equity Department here to provide technical support. Thank you, Lisa. And thank you for stepping in after Kayla, which we miss Kayla. And we're thankful for the team that is here going on to keep this going. Oh, we have our share.
I would say keep going. And
Okay, so I'm gonna pass it on to Anna for roll call.
awesome. Manoj Alapiria. Brittany Brown. Olivia Dudo. Also, Olivia let me know that they're not going to be able to be here. Cameron Fisher. Sandra Kehoe.
Present.
Joanne Mina.
Present.
Carolyn Peacock Biggs. Jody Saffert.
Here.
Kay Vincent.
Here.
And Jasmine Wilder.
Here, present.
Back to you. And however you both want to.
So we just did roll call. So if you
Wonderful.
wanna.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Okay, so so we're going to open up with taking a moment to acknowledge that Ben suffered a shooting recently, and that collectively the community is going through a level of trauma that is, I don't know, bringing a lot of feelings and emotions. And so in order to kind of hold some space here in this group, what I'd like to do is talk about what it means for you personally, or what you're feeling for yourself personally, but also what it's bringing to surface about Hrec. And so I'm going to just go very quickly because I feel like Joanne has some excellent thoughts to share on this. But for me personally, I've never experienced being a mom in a moment like this. And so just sending kids to school and the climate that we live in and all of that, it just hit really heavy. I actually wasn't even in town when I heard the news. And so that's where I personally am, just with that level of, having your safety attacked, or just dealing with the reality that you're not safe and that your children aren't safe. And then when it comes to the Human Rights and Equity Commission, as far as what our role is supposed to be the city of Bend, I feel that I would like to see our second recommendation to City Council come out about what exactly the process is going to look like for how Hrec is incorporated into helping the city match needs with the community, how we are incorporated with anything that has to do with the experience of the citizens of Bend, or actually the community of Bend, and how they're treated, what their experiences are as they interact with the city, as they even look to the city for help or direction. I feel like that's something that the Human Rights and Equity Commission needs to be intimately involved in. And so my top of mind thought is that a recommendation like this has been necessary for a while, even in incidents that have already occurred. in the last timeline of the existence of the Human Rights and Equity Commission. So I want to see us, take matters into our hands to make sure that we're elevated to being able to have feedback and be incorporated, be a part of the process, whatever it may be, when the city is connecting with the community, especially in moments that are incredibly, that affect, the most vulnerable among us. So that's me. I would like to hand it over to our vice chair.
Thank you. And thank you for opening this space. I'll try to be brief because I know we have a lot to cover. That's my neighborhood. So I was at the McDonald's drive-thru when I started hearing the sounds, and I was in disbelief. So I asked the teen that gave me my food if he was familiar with those sounds, because I didn't want to believe that they were what they were. And so I rushed home and paused quickly to think what is the best route, the safest route to get to my kids. Well, at the same time, knowing that that route, the quickest route, is also the route towards the shooter. And that's the position that no one should be in. One of the things that I did was reach out to Ian from the legal office here at the city. And I learned what are the limitations for us as a city. We're not able to regulate sale of transfer of guns. However, there's opportunities for us to advocate at the state level. There are things we can do with pawn shops and other places that resale. So overall, I hope that the Human Rights and Equity Commission can incorporate that into the work plan, and that we can also learn from other cities and share our feedback of what is things that we're hoping to implement that will keep our community safer. I will pass it on to whoever's ready.
Any commissioners who would like to share anything?
Yes, I could speak on it. It was very difficult. I just moved here in March, and it has been very interesting. I had just left Safeway, let's say about 3:30, and I didn't even cut the television on. My neighbor texted me. She says, "Where are you?" And I said, "At home." She says, "Stay there. There's an active shooter down the street." I didn't know how to feel. I really didn't. I got very numb. And I felt as if I was exposed to any and everything at that moment. And it brought up some prior trauma. It always takes you back to something that happened when you felt the same way. And I can honestly say I'm not sure how I feel about that. I really don't. And today I rode by, yesterday I rode by and it had the tape and everything. And it was very disheartening. It was very disheartening from a community, from a new member of this community, from a parent. It hit so many, it checked off a lot of unsafe boxes for me, and it brought up some things that I didn't think it would. So maybe we would want to add in people that were exposed, but not directly, but indirectly, which brought up triggers for them. Because you don't even think about your trauma until you have something that reminds you of being unsafe. I don't know how we could implement something like that or have it available for people that want to talk or something like that to help out.
Anyone else?
Ian has his hand up.
Ian.
Thanks, everyone. I'm not going to go into what cities can and can't do to regulate firearms unless people have particular questions. I'm happy to answer them. I will say that there is a measure on the ballot in November in Oregon. It's been numbered Measure 114, and it is essentially a permit to purchase measure, which would require somebody to get a permit and go through a more extensive process than the law currently requires today in order to purchase a firearm in Oregon. So that is going to be on the ballot in November. I can't say and wouldn't even speculate whether it would have stopped the person responsible for Sunday's tragedy from purchasing the firearms they used, which they did purchase legally. So it's really hard to speculate on that, and I won't do it. But I think one of the ideas that proponents of Measure 14 would probably use to explain their motivation is they want to create opportunities to identify people who shouldn't have guns, who can purchase them legally now, to be sort of flagged by the system by requiring them to go through a permit process in order to purchase. So that's something that I think there's going to be a lot of advocacy around. It is already on the ballot. So if you're interested in this issue where the regulatory changes really need to happen at the state level first, there is something on the ballot in November that I think people are going to be really interested in learning more about after what happened this week.
And to your point, Jasmine, too, I think, and Carolyn, is a role that HREC can play in partnership with council is to create that kind of co-agenda, that legislative agenda, and write those letters of support to senators and do some advocacy on that front. I know that council is already discussing what does an advocacy plan look like at a state and federal level. Joanne, yeah.
And I wanted to ask Ian, can the Human Rights and Equity Commission endorse measures or have a say, for example, like support or, vote yes or no?
I think the best path for any city advisory body that is interested in an issue is to advocate that the city take a position. So I think Hrec advocating to council to engage in advocacy or take a position on a particular issue is probably the right path. And I can tell you that council members are obviously thinking about these issues. So that's where I'd recommend Hrec spend its energy, is consider making a recommendation or advocating to council that the city take a position on this.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. Just making sure my folks on the virtually are good to go.
Sorry, Jasmine, could I have a moment?
Yes, of course. Cassandra, go ahead.
I didn't raise my hand, sorry. I really appreciate what Ian's saying and Joanne is saying, and I would definitely, if the other members are interested, look to putting something on our next agenda for September in terms of talking through. I know we're really busy today, but talking through what that might look like, the recommendation to City Council regarding this, since it is something that we do have currently on our work plan. I think that it would be important and part of that. Maybe this next month also being clear with Ian about the legalities of what we're looking at and what we can and cannot influence. So I would certainly like to speak about this more and do everything we can from an advocacy point of view as we kind of come out of the numbness a little bit. I'm in the anger portion right now where I'm angry, and I'm angry about nothing happening and nothing going to happen. So I want to be part of that solution. I know so many of you do too, from who I've spoken with. So I would really like to move forward with scheduling that for our next session.
Quick additional note on this topic. I think it's highly likely that there will be at least some discussion, maybe high level, but some discussion at the next council meeting on September 7th about legal authority that cities have, maybe what's on the ballot in November, and what the city council wants to do or prioritize in terms of advocacy. So I would encourage everyone to watch that meeting, and that may inform where the city goes or where Hrec wants to go.
Okay, I'm going to push us forward because we do have, in fact, a very packed agenda, as our vice chair mentioned. Really quick, I actually am going to go back to Cassandra. We took time to have this discussion and to hold this space. The original plan was for our new safety lead to share with us along with or to share with us the outcomes of some of the meetings and planning that has happened along with Manoj around Hrec becoming stronger and more effective. So I'll turn that over to you if you would like to share with us, Cassandra.
Absolutely. And I think Jasmine and I spoke with Manoj and via email, and just in order to provide that time for the space for people to share, I think we will move that to next session. And Manoj and I plan on emailing the commissioners individually just to give updates, check in how they're feeling, and move forward through email after this meeting.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to do an approval of the minutes from our meeting on 7/27/2022. As always, those have gone out by email. If there is any corrections that need to be made, please say so now. Otherwise,
Look for a motion in a second.
I'm going to look for a motion in a second to approve those minutes. Anyone?
I'll make motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. We're so approved. Okay, so all in favor of,
Yep.
so all in favor of approving those meeting minutes from the July meeting, please raise your hand or say aye. Okay. Minute.
Mhm.
I saw him physically go. Sorry. Okay, so those minutes are approved. Okay, the important stuff that we need to, as far as action goes for Human Rights and Equity Commission, and what ties in everything that has come up today and will continue to come up. And that is Hrec's work plan. I almost said action plan. Last meeting, we really outlaid a lot of the group's input, and we are now preparing. We have an outline and a draft that everyone has had an opportunity to review. I want to point out that we are actually presenting to City Council on September 7th meeting. So we want to make a robust recommendation, which is something we'll deal with here later in the agenda. So I want to make sure that commissioners are recognizing that this is your opportunity to weigh in and to provide your thoughts and your feedback to be incorporated in this, included in this process, and to make sure that your voice is being heard. And beyond even just what the thoughts are on this draft is, we're also going to discuss the process of outreach to our community. Okay, so that's the other thing that we're coming to you to confer as our commissioners about how this is going to look, so that we are prepared to have a strong presence with City Council and to have our messaging be clear and concise and our desires just well established. Okay, so that's what makes this meeting so important. So this internal draft, which thank you, Anna, very much for everything that you're doing to keep this in front of our eyes. I hope you're looking over it. I know that we've all had an opportunity already. I think specifically because our recommendation has a sense of urgency around it, and it has to do with the camping codes that are currently being put together and moved through council at a quick rate. And we have, Hrec is basically inserting ourselves into this to make a recommendation. And so that's going to be a huge part of the discussion. And I think it's important to note that, you know, what is in this work plan is absolutely correlating and directly reflecting what we want to see when we make recommendations like this one. If we move forward with a recommendation or even around inspired by the shooting that happened, these things we have to make sure that there's, like, you know, a clear correlation, I think, and that you feel that we're putting forth a work plan that will properly set us up to make the types of recommendations that we want to make to City Council. So that's all I'm going to say on that. Anna, I would like you to walk us through the work plan as it stands today. And also, we're looking to you for a recommendation, the initial recommendation for how the community input process will look. And I say initial recommendation because commissioners, we also know that many of you have lots of experience actually in this space. And so we're wanting you to weigh in as well.
Mhm.
All right. Go ahead, Anna, take us away.
Thanks, Jasmine. So I minimized my screen just to a little bullet point. So please, if anybody has their hand raised, I'm going to try and keep track, but if I could ask our chair and vice chair to make sure that that people feel free to jump in. So input to date, I just want to remind folks that this is really kind of the first milestone with the work plan development process. So we've gathered kind of ideas and what has come up in community. So this current list reflects a number of things, some of which is in your charter as the Human Rights and Equity Commission. Coming out of that, we have suggestions here that have come from engagement opportunities that my team has engaged in. So out in community, folks are talking about how we're doing contracting as an example. And so we're including that here. So it's kind of community input to date, gathering information from your charter that it says these are the priorities that HRAC will be working on that were set by council. And then also some of the work of my department as well. So, and some requests from council. So for example, council's goal setting process, they would like to see you engage in that. This is in no particular order. These bullet points are just how they are currently drafted again in the draft work plan. So the goal today is to have this group have some discussion and provide some direction to me on whether or not I have 3 strategic questions, but whether or not we feel that this current draft list encompasses what you've heard from community, what you would like to see HRAC prioritize and work on over the next couple of years. And then from here, we'll talk about what a community input process looks like. Where is this posted? How are we doing that? What does a timeline look like for that? So I do have a draft recommendation, and I'm looking for input and direction and feedback from this team to be able to start to schedule some of those things out. And then ultimately, does it make sense of when we want to bring the recommendation to City Council? Because ultimately City Council does have to approve your work plan. And so to Jasmine's point about presenting to City Council on the 7th, next week, that is an update. And so that's an opportunity to talk about prior to that, depending on how the vote goes this evening on the recommendation coming from HRAC on the unsanctioned camping code. I'll submit that to council, and that will be an opportunity for you all to engage in any discussion with City Council, as well as provide an update on your work plan development process. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to quickly go through what we have here. So establish a process for community members to be able to share acts of discrimination while offering resources, navigation, and appropriate triaging. This is an element of your charter set by council. Establish a process of restorative justice for the Bend Police Department and community members. That is something coming from the commission. Review and establish recommendations on gun sales and permitting within city limits and establish community safety processes, policies, and procedures. Again, a recommendation of the commission. Develop an equity framework to be utilized by all city departments in all stages of policy development and decision-making processes. This is something that is out of my department, is being led by my department currently, and I would say is in pilot form. And it's probably a longer term goal, but something that also is a goal of city council to be able to apply some of those frameworks to decision making. Review and establish recommendations on city's contracting, permitting, and sponsorship processes, policies, and procedures. That is something coming from community that I have heard several times. Create community engagement and city council goal setting process. This is something that came from, I think, city council, but as well as the commission has highlighted this as an interesting process that you would like to take place or participate in. Establish a language access policy or program to establish Spanish speakers and non-English speakers, community members to have equitable access to city services. I think there's an opportunity to include accessibility here as well. And so developing that language access program is something that currently lives kind of in my department and also with Zavi's work as well, and has come up from the commission as well. And then establish a low-income housing protection plan to ensure affordable housing remains affordable in Bend. That's something coming from the commission. And I want to acknowledge Vice Chair Mina that you did include the unsanctioned camping code as a specific action item. And I removed that from this list on this slide solely because I think there's a conversation of, do we want to, and it's one of the questions that I have for this group is, do you want to include in your work plan? I think it's important to carve out some space for those ongoing roles and responsibilities, like providing feedback on Envision Ben's funding request, unsanctioned camping code, kind of that continual ongoing advisory element. So the first question that I'm going to ask and pause here for group discussion is, how do we feel about this list? Are there things missing that you've heard in community? So the first question is, are there priorities that you've heard from community that aren't reflected in this plan yet?
I have something that I'm wondering about, a question, and it comes to maybe so two things. One that I'm interested in is the action item around establishing recommendations for the city's contracting, permitting, and sponsorship processes, policies, and procedures. Is there language potentially missing, maybe not, around addressing the partner's commitment to equity specifically? So as in, one of the things that we would be looking for, of course, is yes, that they are, I would like us to encourage that the city uses stronger than just the regular status quo around an organization's true and authentic commitment to equity that is being reflected very deeply throughout their core values. And so that basically that the vetting process would be more intense than a boilerplate.
So like community benefits, is that what you, or on all fronts?
Yeah, sorry, say it again.
Like, are you thinking community benefits specifically within contracting of like making that a priority in terms of criteria? Or is it stronger language throughout what is currently on the draft?
Yeah, I'm just, and I could be wrong. I'm just wondering if the language of this action item is being explicit enough about the fact that we are wanting partners with the city to have to go through a more comprehensive, vetting check for their commitment to equity, and that be that the commitment to equity be prioritized higher than your boilerplate assessment.
Gotcha.
So I don't know if that needs to be just more explicit. And then the other one is in the housing protection plan. Another one that I personally feel strongly about. I noticed there's very specific language to, and this might be to Ian, but there's very specific language to talk about us helping or recommending to the city that they protect low-income housing, or specifically low-income or naturally occurring affordable housing. And I don't know if that's on purpose, but I know a big part of it was, hey, 80% of this community are renters, and many of us are not in affordable housing units and are also in danger of being completely priced out at any moment, a natural disaster causing an entire family to be uprooted. it seems like this is very specific to affordable housing, which of course is important. But I think does not actually address the larger issue of many people being in renting situations, cannot afford to buy and can barely afford to pay rent, which is increasing constantly, and are not in affordable housing units or naturally what I would consider naturally occurring affordable housing. Is that are we specifically identifying that because, is there a reason for that?
I'll be more than glad to answer because I put that bullet point in there. So in the online version, you can click on natural occurring affordable housing, NOAH, and there's a whole criteria for what that is. It's not just hot housing. And natural occurring affordable housing is mobile home parks, is older homes here in the downtown area, like everything that is lower in price because maybe is out of town, maybe is smaller, maybe is older. And the idea is acknowledging that those places exist within all cities. And the idea is that we could be aware of them and then find ways to protect them. But also, if we look in that specific bullet point, it talks about supporting renters in general to create tenants unions. And we know that even though there are laws out there to protect the rights of tenants, if tenants do not have a committee, they don't have the same power to advocate for themselves as if they are organized. So that is one way in which all renters could benefit and bend. So, and the affordable housing, natural occurring affordable housing is not specific to, HUD or any of these programs. So we could be generous in our description of naturally affordable housing.
That is helpful. Is there, I guess, is there a reason maybe that the city feels that that's outside of their purview?
My recommendation would be that maybe you all can, what I'm hearing as a next step for myself is to maybe go touch base with our affordable housing. We have like affordable housing, a whole committee of community members that work on this, and talk to some internal staff, maybe our housing director, Lynn McConnell, and talk a little bit about what's within the parameters of the city and how can maybe HREC partner with that committee. I think could be some overlap there, but it might just be information finding at this point so that we can further, maybe we want to keep that one a little bit more broad and then get some information, especially as tonight we want to come up with something that we want to put out to community for input on, right? So I'm happy to do some of that information finding and maybe include a subgroup of HREC members if there are particular folks that are interested in that topic, that we can kind of get together for 45 minutes to an hour to ask some questions to see if that's something that we want to continue with.
Yeah, because in that bullet point, there's also like very specific looking into the number of vacation rentals, short-term rentals, second homes. And so we'll love to see what has already been done and also where we could support and strengthen that work.
This is a huge.
Do you want to hop up to the mic?
I'm just saying it's a huge topic what you're talking about. Even just the short-term rental piece is something that we've had, we're having multiple work sessions on. So
I would, can you, just for the folks on virtually.
Link to Jenna.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess my suggestion would be maybe we talk to Lynn, start with Lynn, and sort of go from there, and maybe Lynn can sort of set the landscape, and together we can sort of find places that HREC would be able to, make an impact and sort of work on as part of the work plan. That's just my suggestion.
I don't quite understand. I understand the need to collaborate 100%. But what I don't understand is exactly what piece of number 8 feels like it's out of reach for us. And I can read it real quick.
And here's this.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't have a copy of that.
So the action item is establish a low-income housing protection plan to ensure affordable housing remains affordable in Bend. And some of the hopes, the outcomes we were hoping for is to create a code to ensure mobile home park renters and renters of other naturally occurring affordable housing, including all subsidized low-income housing already in place, to have tools and support to create tenant unions and negotiate their rental agreements to uphold their rights as tenants. Create code, second bullet point. Create code to ensure there's a rental price protection for mobile home park renters and renters of other natural occurring affordable housing. Is that just those two?
No, it's on the next page.
Oh, sorry, too many pages. Create a tax code to reduce the number of short-term vacation rentals, second homes, and other mostly vacant homes by 75% in the next 2 years. So out of those 3 things,
That's big. Yeah. That's huge.
so my question is, are these things outside, and maybe this is a question for Ian, are these outside of the scope of jurisdiction the city has? And whether these are already something that there's already a plan on its way, and that we're just maybe duplicating efforts. But if
Yeah,
there's nothing on the books with these 3 things, then I think it's valid to hear why the pushback.
yeah, a few thoughts, and I hope none of this comes across as pushback. But I think context is always useful. So when I see the bullet point, establish a low-income housing protection plan to ensure affordable housing remains affordable in Bend. I mean, first and foremost, I don't know whether there's anything to read into that language other than what's on the screen, and a couple of thoughts. So what we in the city sometimes call capital A affordable housing, these are projects that we subsidize through our affordable housing fund and try to facilitate however we can through using our development code and every other tool at our disposal. Those projects are restricted by deed and have to remain affordable for decades. So there are legal requirements in place that keep those projects affordable. Now, whether they are literally affordable to every single person is another question, but they do fit the definition of affordable housing. Secondly, we have statewide rent control in Oregon. And similarly, it may not be enough in every case to make housing attainable or maintainable for everyone, but rent increases in Oregon are now capped. So is it capped? Are they capped at the right amount? That's a policy debate, but we do have statewide rent control in Oregon that applies generally to all rental housing, including I think what we're calling naturally occurring affordable housing. So we do have that in place at a state level since I think 2019 when that legislation was passed, just before the pandemic, interestingly enough. On short-term rentals, and again, don't take this as pushback, but if the city said we're going to reduce short-term rentals in the city of Bend by 75% in 2 years, I think that's the metrics I heard.
Yeah.
That is a prospect that would likely cost the city millions and millions of dollars in takings lawsuits from permitted property owners who have gone through a legal process to get a land use permit to do this with their property. So I say that not to discourage people from thinking about policy changes that might gradually reduce the number of short-term rentals in Bend, because there are some of those things. And I think one thing that's working through the process right now is an amendment to our development code that will increase the buffer between short-term rentals from 250 feet to 500 feet. And that was at council's direction a few months ago after learning a lot about the short-term rental system in Bend and how the numbers of short-term rentals have changed over the years. And the answer to that, contrary, I think, to some perceptions, is they haven't changed that much in terms of the percentage of the city's overall housing units that are dedicated to short-term rental activities. It's remained about 2% of the city's overall housing stock. So as more units have come online, more housing has been constructed. It's true that more short-term rental permits have been issued, but the ratio has stayed about the same. So they're not gobbling up more and more of our housing stock. What the council has directed is an increase in the buffer between permitted short-term rentals, a doubling of that buffer from 250 to 500 feet. When that is adopted, if it is adopted this fall, as it works its way through the planning commission and the council process, it's not going to immediately result in a bunch of permitted short-term rentals going away and becoming illegal because they're now within a buffer, but it is going to make it harder for more people to get permits. And as properties are sold and some of those permits are voided, it may lead to a gradual decrease in the number of short-term rentals. I don't expect it to be like a 75% decrease over a couple of years, but it may lead to a decrease or at least a stabilization, or it is at least going to make it more difficult for people to get new permits. So there are some steps that are being taken. I think they're probably going to have gradual impacts. Big steps like changing your system and sort of getting rid of short-term rentals or phasing them out. It is something that other cities have considered. Hood River has an example, but they built in a big run-out period because you essentially have to create an opportunity for property owners with permits. And I'm simplifying it tremendously, but you have to create an opportunity for them to recoup some of the investment they have made relying on a city's regulations before you just, I don't want to say pull the rug out from under them, but before you change the system. If you change the system too drastically, you end up with, I'll say, potentially really expensive lawsuits that affect all of us and can impair the city's ability to do all the other things that we all want it to be doing. So there are changes that can be considered. The council is considering or will be considering some changes it has recommended, but they're probably more incremental than some people would like on the short term.
In terms of time, can I just do a couple of follow-up questions? What's the 2% of housing? What number is that?
That's how many short-term rentals that of the total percentage of
Is that
housing.
8,000? Is that 10,000? How many?
I'm trying to remember.
It's around, I wish I had the data in front of me.
Okay.
Oh, I'm reluctant to throw a number out there, but I think it's pretty
Yeah,
clear from
no
the data.
worries. So
Yeah, the
let me move
increases
to the
haven't been
second question.
that state.
So we don't know exactly what that 2% is, but also I heard you say that the system as is created the results we have. So I think it's important for the city then to acknowledge that we have had a system for a while that allowed for wealthy people to build and to heighten the price of our homes and to displace us. So I think, thank you, Ian, for sharing. I look forward to continue to working with the housing committee.
I think that that we do want to speak to the housing committee. I think ultimately I would have multiple questions around data now that I am a bit more now that I have understood like the ecosystem that we're dealing with better. I again will push back that I'm concerned that this language leaves out the majority of the renters in Bend, and that while we are always congratulating ourselves for affordable housing units and things like that, that there ultimately are like the largest percentage of the people are still like surfing on couches, have to have 5 roommates in order to afford a place. Like, I'm just saying, these are the people who are like not being seen in the data and also not being there's not any proactive work that's being done. And so that I think is what is a big part of what I believe Hrec needs to challenge the housing committee around. So I think we need to have a meeting, but we need to come prepared to kind of push back and then allow them to kind of like, well, what, where's the solutions here? And then advise us on how we can put pressure in the space that we hold to make that happen.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that the key thing is that there is a big difference between what we call capital A affordable housing, which is what, the city is, subsidizes, and what I think you're talking about, which is the lowercase a affordable housing, right? And then there are limits to what the city can do, but that doesn't mean that the city can't be promoting, yeah. So I think that's great. And I also just one other thing, Joanne, about the short-term rental discussion. I think we're probably going to talking at our second meeting in September is one of the things that we're trying to also do is incentivize short-term rentals to turn into long-term rentals so that they can sort of end up being something that residents of Bend can use as opposed to, to tourists. And yeah. So.
I want to recognize that Carolyn had her hand up.
Yes, I also wanted to make sure that there would be some type of process in place for looking at the cap on the renter cap that you said that took place in 2019. I would like to see that the process that we're doing to make sure that that cap is even substantial for the amount of money people make and the rent that they're paying out now. That was one of the biggest concerns that I heard when I first moved here, is that you were going to have a hard time finding housing.
Oh yeah.
Which it was very expensive.
Yep.
So should we keep this? And then what I'm hearing is maybe my recommendation would be to get a subgroup of members who are here and interested in this topic to set up some time with Lynn McConnell so we can ask some questions outside of this space to get a little bit more up to speed. Does that sound like a good plan?
Yes, I think that's an excellent place to start. And then, yeah, and you can also feel free to do your information gathering campaign. Just, I think, knowing that Hrec is asking to better understand the process so that we can ultimately challenge it. So that would be the end goal, what we're looking for. And so we need those types of things to help establish our position. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who'd like to share on any of these points?
I think for
any of them, because I know that we have.
I think the questions that I have or the direction I'm looking for, recognizing that we have a little bit over an hour left for the meeting and two other really big topics.
Yep.
My three questions or direction that I'm looking for is, are there priorities that you've heard from community that aren't currently reflected in the plan that we want to include? And again, the goal is to conclude kind of a baseline that we want to put out to community. So that's what we really want to do kind of as a short-term goal. Should the work plan include ongoing HREC roles and responsibilities? So again, such as providing advice and recommendations on council-specific requests that you all are working on right now are examples of that. Those are very time-consuming, as we know. And so I just wanted to kind of acknowledge that we probably need to carve out a little bit of time in the work plan to say this is an ongoing bucket of work.
Yeah.
And the last question is what will move into the community engagement strategy, which I also want input on. So there's a few slides left. So I just want to pause for those top two questions.
Can you repeat the last part of what you just said again?
The last question is considering HREC and city staff capacity, what does meaningful and realistic community input look like to ensure we're gathering feedback from the communities we're all here to serve? So that's kind of, we'll move into a recommended timeline, but I first want to make sure that there's an opportunity that I feel like we're walking away with these. This is our current draft that we're going to go out, and it's iterative and it could grow when community says you're missing something else on public safety, you're missing something else on this. So I think that's next, but first these top two bullet points.
Yeah, so to help the first one wrap a bit quicker, I feel like when we open this up, commissioners, if you do have something, just state what it is. And then rather than any form of early discussion, we'll hand this to Anna to do information seeking to get those questions answered that the commissioners put forward. So if you have questions or if you see that something is missing, go ahead and say that now.
So is it worth going? I'm sorry.
So go ahead.
I was just curious, is it worth going by each action item?
So I think that's that's something that I'm hoping that the commission continues to do outside of this space, given that we only have 2 hours. I think that's work done, that's pre-work for the next meeting or before we do any sort of like active listening session, that the commission is sending those things to me. So what I'll do is I'll update anything. If there is additions to this current bulleted list, I will add those. And what I see is the very basic logistical steps to that and send out another draft.
And I think that one bullet point that we could add or a recommendation action item is a endorsement of position 114, or having a position on 114.
Specifically that, or do you want us to have a bullet point where we consider making, continual recommendations to the city or to city council about different positions we wish that they would take?
So,
So this is 2022, 2023. So I don't know if like
change that if you have advice on changing that, I think.
I
Absolutely.
think it's good to revise it every 12 months, but we can do it more broad, like you're saying.
Because I thought it might be a category where it comes up. I actually haven't seen it come up, before now. However, I could see it being an ongoing asset.
I can see the HREC playing a role in providing feedback or input on the city's legislative agenda in general. So if it's,
There you go.
Okay.
There you go.
I'll add that. And recognizing, I think we haven't heard from a ton of folks online.
Folks on our screen, do you guys, any commissioners have anything to share? Things that are missing? Questions for Anna to get answered for us? Okay, again, this is something that we have been seeing, so it is actually great that we feel so good about it as a group. Thank you for the work you're going to be doing to further this. I think now the next part would be, should the work plan include Hrec weighing in on kind of like these ongoing important discussions, or you want to skip to input?
Well, so I think what I'm hearing is that we want to add the legislative piece. And if nobody has any disagreements against me adding just a placeholder to say the ongoing advice to council on their requests, I think.
Okay, so that has been answered. Gotcha.
And then I am gonna just walk through. This is, you can provide me input here or after this meeting if you think about it and something comes up. But this is, again, thinking about current staff capacity, who internally would be supporting this. I'd feel like there are a lot of staff members that would be engaging and supporting HREC's input process, but I wanted to suggest a very basic baseline. These dates can change, the content of this can change, and this is what I'm just bringing as a very like a boilerplate template for you all to provide some direction on. So we're currently at the end of August, which is currently we are providing direction and input on the draft, and then I'll update that work plan as part of today. And then moving into September, really looking at drafting and translating outreach materials. So what is the content that we're trying to share, giving that kind of summary of what it is the HREC is doing, embarking on this work plan development process. Set a date for potentially an input session. It could be a future meeting of yours. It could be separate from these meetings. It could be a picnic in the park discussion. It could be at a community center. But setting aside some time to hear from community and having you all strategically and city staff strategically asking folks that we know have a really huge stake in your work plan to come provide input. We could have food, so we have a budget for that within my department, and I would hope that that would be strongly shaped by HREC and carried out logistically by city staff. And then part of that, to me, we have to make the plan accessible to the community. So after translation, updating HREC's website to really lead with, here's our current work plan, here's the dates and opportunity to provide input by this date, And then you all would be revising and voting on what your final work plan is to bring to council. There's also opportunity, I think, to discuss social media posts and what are other outreach strategies. If you all want to have a coffee with somebody, share the plan, talk about, does this feel right? I think there's opportunity there. So kind of September is really setting those things in stone of what this group wants to do to gain input. And then October, I'm going to pause. Jody, you raised your hand.
Thank you. I'm assuming the community input process, what you're talking about here right now, the intent would be for meeting with a bunch of community folks from across the city of Bend around providing input on the work plan, nothing else.
Well, I think it's introducing who HREC is for anybody who hasn't been tracking.
Okay.
Talking about what the mission is. And then I think also very much, here's the work plan and kind of a Q&A, and then having a discussion maybe over meal. Do you
Great.
feel like it's asking some strategic questions?
I think it would be important. Thank you, Anna, for that. I think it would just be important to have kind of a standard, at least documented or thought out process around what that would look like. And what I mean by that is, at least in my field of practice, if we're looking for information from a variety of people, it's nice to have kind of a standard data set or question set that you're going to be asking so that we get everyone has the opportunity to answer similar questions from their perspective. So my recommendation would be that these have some level of structure around what it is we're asking and why, so that there's an opportunity for other voices to be heard. But if you ask one group of questions one way and another group, is that really biased or fair? So I would just recommend that we have some sort of structure.
Thanks, Jody.
Mhm.
Yes, I saw Manoj unmute, but then we also have two folks in person. So chair or vice chair, however you want to handle it.
Since our commissioners on screen are coming in, let's go ahead and work our way through each of them.
Manoj, did you have comment?
No, I didn't. Thank you, though.
Joanne?
So I think that one of the things that we gotta be very clear, all of us, is that this work plan is the community's work plan. The Human Rights and Equity Commission is for the people. We're supposed to represent them. So I think that with that in mind, I would like to know if we have within the budget an opportunity for folks to do outreach, to have people with clipboard, and we're color coordinated, so that's very accessible to me at least. and just having folks be decision makers. Do you approve of these bullet points? Is this something you will cheer on? That's just my thought.
I have a concern around language. I feel like that this is a bit inaccessible in how it sounds. And so we maybe need to translate some of our goals into more layman's terms or regular everyday people so that everyone's comprehending what we're talking about. Because I feel like even like for me, and I helped contribute to this, that I am carefully reading each thing, like, and rereading and, making sure that I'm understanding what's there. And I would not want our community input process to be hindered or compromised by us just being too inaccessible with the language that we're using. So I would maybe want us to do a draft like that. And then, of course, I 100% agree with Jody as far as I think there's usually anytime you do any type of survey work like this, there's a huge consideration for like how things are worded, and that we really kind of vet the how and make sure that we're not limiting people or pigeonholing people. I don't know if that's the correct word, but making them feel like they're limited in what we're in scope, and or have completely the wrong scope than what the question was meant to ask. So I think all of that's going to be something that's going to take a little bit of effort and need maybe even professional development, and maybe needs to be, we need to use some of our budget on that point. The last part was, what about, just like for ideas, what about commissioners who have the time volunteering their time to meet for coffee? That's another, I don't know, we could give it even a name or something. And then as people have the time, because I know that sometimes you don't, sometimes you do as a volunteer position, from week to week, and can really fluctuate. And then we can have them have a chance to like just sit down, literally have coffee. And I think that that could like kind of help with the language accessibility if there's just like this internal script that commissioners have, that they're able to just have a normal, facilitate a normal conversation and get like, what is it that's missing from your community? You know what I mean? You know, rather than this, like, it's a work plan and, you know, this is a strategic, you know, there's all this kind of like strategic language and city language, government language that's in there. So strip it down, what it's missing from your community. And then last, can we please have a digital version of this? Because people, I mean, I know me, I have lots of thoughts. I have the ability to give those thoughts without necessarily needing to be, you know, having the time to go and do and participate in one of these. So I think we need both options, both roads.
I think that's good feedback. And Cameron, I know that you had
Yeah,
your hand up, and I see Manoj's hand up as well, and then I can respond.
thank you. I was thinking about a little bit about both what Jody and Jasmine were saying. This is a very robust document with a lot of language and ideas, and to hand this to somebody and say, hey, answer my 3 questions. And I like your 3 questions that you had that were connected, but maybe in a bridged version or a bulleted piece with some of just the 9 action items, and maybe a few with a narrative and a couple milestones, something like that. I think might be a little more amenable to folks to get their input. And then, and with those 3 questions that you had, or something kind of that we could kind of, when Jody would had some continuity with whether these are focus groups, or I don't know how feasible coffee is for folks if we're trying to get the most bang for our buck with input. And so I'm glad you mentioned the budget, because I'd love to know kind of what that might look like. More of a focus group, if we were all reaching out to different community members to do that, because what's most feasible and effective to get as much input as possible on what's missing or what doesn't fit.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And Manoj, before we go to you really quick, just to respond to some of those elements, I think tonight really is about a high level recommendation, and based off of the high level input, I would go and kind of draft out and bring to the leadership team more of those granular things. I mean, there's a reason that we don't have this giant document up, is because we have members that want to know logistically, how are we going to get these things done if we were to pick our top 3 today. So giving an idea of what does the time look like? What are the milestones and elements involved? But yes, also, how are we going to do this? I think comes next when it comes to an input session. For me, it's like picturing community members. We show up, we have a meal, we introduce ourselves. Maybe there's current goals up on the wall. We're doing a stickering exercise. We're having open discussion, time for Q&A, breaks, check-ins, like all of those elements, I think, are what come next in terms of what do we feel is the right path forward. I like the idea of like an online survey. Again, we're posting something to the website. Does it include a link to something that is consistent that we're also asking at an actual listening session? And there's also other ways that I'll talk about next of how community members can provide input. But I think we're specifically wanting to talk about the input process that we want to intentionally do, but then what are the other ways community members can access this commission? So Manoj, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Love the discussion on this. I love that we're going to conduct some listening sessions. If you've heard me speak before, that's a big important factor for me. So when we do needs finding, I would characterize this more as like, as opposed to getting reactions to what we've already crafted, is to keep what we've already crafted in the back of our minds and do 3. First of all, let me talk about audience. I think there should be 3 audiences. First, there's the one-on-one. There's the like coffee dates that you talked about. Then there's focus groups where we've identified core audience types, where we're doing a series of group sessions. Maybe it's, you know, For housing, we talked to a group of renters as an example. Then there's the actual survey, which is again more mass and broad. And I wonder if when we do the smaller sessions, we characterize it more as around needs finding, where there's what we do an unaided approach, where we actually take our 10 ideas off the table and say, what do you need? What should Hrec be working towards? Knowing that we've got the ideas already in hand and get feedback in an unaided basis. And then if room allows, such as in a focus group, then we present, if there's a lot of resonance on a particular topic that we haven't included, we talk about that. Or if there's a topic that, such as housing, that we have included, here is what we've come up with, and give them sort of the meta version, the light version, as Jasmine talked about. I just wonder if kind of thinking about it as levels from depth to breadth, one-on-ones all the way up to a survey, and then an unaided and kind of created a matrix. I don't know if I'm being clear, but the idea is to solicit feedback in a more open-ended basis, as opposed to here are 10 ideas, give us feedback, allowing people in a smaller setting to give their feedback without then being overwhelmed by all these categories and big words, etc. So just something for us to think about in terms of making this a true listening session, as opposed to pushing forth an Hrec sort of agenda.
Good feedback.
Well, my original thought was, I think that, thank you for bringing us back to that, Manoj, because I feel like that was like the original idea. But I did follow the matrix that you're setting up, and I love the depth and the breadth. So I felt like I was just feeling at peace as you laid that out. So appreciate that, Joanne.
I would like to just remind us that the City of Bend has a scope that we work within. The Human Rights and Equity Commission has been around for over a year, and not understanding the scope of what we can and cannot do has had us not very efficient for the community. I think that it's important that, yes, we simplify the language, yet we are very aware of not being paternalistic. The community has a right to approve the bullet points, to approve the proposal. And I just want us to keep that in mind, all of us. And also, as we're thinking of community input, I think we want to be mindful that we want to have the input of those that have been historically marginalized, underserved. So we actually create an equitable plan. And also, lastly, I would like to see canvassing. Online surveys are great, and one-to-ones, we can run the risk of only talking to the people we know. When you go canvassing, you talk to everybody. So I think that we should consider that option as well. Thank you.
How does the group feel about, given time? I just want to recognize that we have public comment, I think, is next, and then 2 big items. Is there a subgroup of folks that would like to meet with me maybe next week or the following to build out like co-created recommendation a level deeper than this with that reflects the feedback we heard tonight, to bring maybe to the leadership team to get some input on? Or is that, how would you like to?
I think that I would hope that the leadership team, I think, happens to be, I don't want to put pressure on people to overextend themselves, is all I'm saying. So, and I know that you seem to be working where we are working with a very tight timeline. So that's where I am wondering, you feel free to push back, but I'm wondering if it's more joint leadership, if this is something that interests you, and we'll have a dedicated meeting to this and try to cut out one of those steps, because we need to kind of move, I think, at a pretty intense pace. My other thought is, I agree with both Manoj and Joanne. I'm wondering, is there an opportunity for us to cut this in in our community input in half, where the first part is a little bit unstructured. Then we take the unstructured feedback, we do our best to add it to the plan, and then we take the plan in a more completed draft back to the community and let them, with, you know, the language and everything, now be able to see, is there something still missing? Kind of like the same workflow we just did as a commission. I think that very closely reflects what we did.
And we can even post it to the HREC's website to have it be publicly available to community while not immediately including those points to Manoj's recommendation first of, we're going to have a clean slate, provide us your top priorities, but then also here's what, because you all are community members as well. And your leaders in community. So having your input in this is important as well. So we can strike a balance, I think, there of here's information on what we're thinking. Do we have it right? Or maybe that comes after having that initial conversation.
Yeah, maybe we could do, mixed. Some of them are doing one and some of them are doing the other. I think that we should move forward, and if we could have you just kind of show us the logistics and how this could be potentially executed. I think we would also like to hear about budget and kind of allocation to each of these tactics.
I'll grab budget information and then share that out at the next leadership team meeting. And then we can figure out how to share that with the rest of the community prior to the next.
And then if we can also choose one of those leadership meetings to be dedicated to the community input conversation, and then open it up to any commissioners who have skill set, desire, passion, capacity to join us.
And just noting that when it reaches a quorum, we do have to have.
Right. We'll keep that in mind.
That is what I have for you all. I feel like I got some great direction. So thank you for your input tonight.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, we have reached the public comment portion of this evening. And this is an opportunity for the public to directly make comments on our agenda and the things that have been brought up even today or during this meeting. And just for the context for people who are both new members and also for folks in the public who don't know, we moved the public comment section of our agenda around and right now we're trying to have it towards the end. We're always open to kind of like just being flexible about that and seeing what best works for our community members. And so we wanted to make sure that this public comment happened directly after our discussion about the work plan, because it's just one of those touch points where we can hear from our community members and know what their thoughts are in real time. So if there's only 2 minutes, and so at the end of the 2 minutes, I'll ask that any public commenters wrap up their sentences. And then if you have additional thoughts, please email us at hrec@bendoregon.gov and continue that. We will receive all of them and we will read them all. So if you have more thoughts to bring to it, please do that. And I'm going to just apologize in advance if I have to interrupt you, but we do have to make sure that we make it through this agenda on time. So this is a great time for the community to give those ideas, to give those thoughts. If you have not had an opportunity or didn't know about that, please come to our next meeting and do so there. All right, do we have anyone who?
Mike Stature. You only have one mic up here.
Now there's 2 mics. And I'll show myself out. Okay, 2 minutes. I will try my very, very best. My name is Mike. I'm the president of the High Desert Peace Kitchen, which is a service providing nonprofit, not just in Bend, but in Central Oregon. We serve the unhoused all over the region, out in the Forest and Sisters, out in the Junipers, and in the city of Bend itself. And I'm here to talk about the camping code. And I want to talk about that ecosystem of camps, which is, I think, the part that the city of Bend doesn't understand, is that it's not just camping in Bend. There's a whole ecosystem that this camping code will impact. So the people who camp inside the city limits of Bend are the people who are not safe out in the Junipers. They are BIPOC, they're LGBTQ2IA+, they are disabled. People who are not safe outside of the city limits of Bend end up having to camp inside the city limits of Bend, where they are the most, in my opinion, they are the very most vulnerable people in our entire community. The city of Bend, frankly, does not understand the dynamics of this ecosystem. The assistant city attorney who's writing this code, I asked him personally if he could name any unhoused person in Bend, and he didn't know one person. And so those are the people who are making this decision. So I'm here, how much time do I have? I'm here specifically about item number 3 in your recommendation later today. I think, for one thing, I think most of your recommendation is outstanding. I really like it. Number 3, I would say, go a step further and recommend that they stop this process completely until there has been an equity review, until they truly understand that ecosystem that I'm talking about. The people that I work with, that I serve in the city of Bend, they are following this process and they are terrified. And I think that's all the time I've got. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chris Nelson?
And Mike, make sure you send us by email the fullness of your thoughts.
Also, maybe offer just very, very quickly, if anybody is interested in a coffee date, need to talk about these things, reach out to High Desert Peace Kitchen on Facebook. I will give you all of my time.
Excellent.
Hello, everybody. Chris Nelson, also with High Desert Peace Kitchen. Work along Mike every week. Prior to that, also worked with John Riggs with Helpers. So have quite a bit of experience. Warm Springs, Madras, Redmond, and then multiple locations in Bend, working with unhoused community. I've been trying to say it. I'm a lot calmer today than I normally am when I'm sitting here. So I think I might be able, it's a much more welcoming atmosphere, it feels like. I might be able to articulate this a little bit better than I have in the past. There is, some people might know the show this comes from, be curious, not judgmental, is a saying I really like. And it's also very difficult. So I really do like everything you guys have on here. I think it's great. And a lot of the issues I see with the city is everything is kind of being geared towards what is the maximum that we can do because of this lawsuit that, you know, we can't do this because they got sued and we can't do that. And the question doesn't really seem to be coming up as often with why would we be doing it? So if there's any way to also kind of push a little bit of a moral compass towards everything that the city is currently doing, not so much what can we legally not do and what can we legally do, but even if we legally can do it, do we really want to as people of Bend? Is that really the foot that we want to put forward that people see when they look at our city? Everything here is great though. So I will try and wrap it up. Yes, be curious, not judgmental. It's very easy to walk by someone's tent and very quickly make a decision of, oh, this is what it is. It's much harder to actually talk to that person and find out all the reasons. But it can be pretty life-changing when you do. There's some pretty cool people out there. So thank you.
Thank you.
We have one attendee. Do you guys usually check this?
Yes.
So I know we have one attendee virtually. If you would like to provide comment tonight, I think we have to be able to allow them to raise their hand. Have you done that? Is Scott able to unmute or to?
They've been unmuted.
Scott, if you'd like to provide comment, we do have time for that to allow that. Okay, Jasmine, I'll turn it back to you.
Okay. Well, we're going right into the unsanctioned camping code. And we need to vote to approve our recommendation. So end action to all of this discussion is a vote for approval. Now, it's really quick. I just need you to we've heard new information, or we take new information right now. How's that working as far as the vote that needs to happen today, and maybe some of these elements being altered or changed or whatever? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy to, I happy to put up on the screen the draft. I know I sent it all in advance, and the leadership team has been a part of reviewing and providing input as of last week. So we can, I think right now it's important to have a little bit of discussion of if there's anything that hasn't come up already. I did ask for input in advance, but if you have, or if things are bubbling up and you'd like to talk about what currently is in there or revising it in any way, now's the time to do that. And I think just recognizing that next week, next Wednesday is the next council meeting where HREC has an opportunity to be in front of council members. So submitting a recommendation in advance is ideal, but not 100% necessary. So.
Okay, so, but is it possible for us to give feedback that will be used and vote on something that is currently in this form?
So you can say, you could be able, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but you could say, vote to approve something with these revisions, then we would be able to make those revisions.
Yes.
Okay, so I know a lot of us have been tracking the process the city has been engaging in to develop rules and regulations about camping within city limits. We know that this policy is going to have a large impact on our community members who are currently experiencing houselessness. So last week, our 5 commission leads met, and much based on our personal experiences with service providers and folks who are passionate about the houseless community, we put together, also when I was just our council liaison, spent a lot of time following the process. Anna, as our director, offered great advice. And I think ultimately my impression, and I'll allow others to share too, was that there's a massive equity concerns, and that for the city of Bend, who centers equity at the middle of our graph, for us to say, through any type of actions or even the speed of something that is being pushed through, that this group matters more than this group is absolutely it's the opposite of why we were here, why we are here. And so, Human Rights and Equity Commission cannot do everything, but one of the things we can do is offer through our recommendations an element of accountability and even an opportunity for the city to maybe rethink, pull back, adjust. And that's what we're able to do right here and right now with this recommendation. I really do agree from a personal point that I want to make sure we are including a reminder about the center of the equity, that there is a convincing argument and language here used that is meant to persuade, and that is meant to convince, and that is meant to have impact on those who hear it. And that is kind of like my, as far as we heard a public speaker talk about moral compass, and that's how I also lean, and I feel like it is here, but that is like really my only personal thought. And then if we want to discuss anything else, I'm going to open it up to other commissioners who have valuable input and say, this is our last minute, this is the moment. Oh, really quick, Manoj, why don't you go ahead and share with us kind of the high level, full briefing of what you're hearing, what your concerns are, and what your thoughts are on this recommendation as is.
Yeah, just so everyone has the full context, I mean, there's been 2 city Q&A sessions in which the city has provided information around where we are and the proposed plan moving forward. Those sessions included people contributing from the community from many perspectives, and with thoughtful questions engaging the council. And with that, we've listened to the discussions. We've crafted in partnership, Hrec in partnership with Anna, have crafted these recommendations, which are meant to provide a balanced and thoughtful recommendation for council in the development of this code. I think we should walk through each of these recommendations in light of where we are to make sure all of us on our commission understand them and are in support of them and provide their feedback. But I think this is of the utmost importance for where we are right now as a city, and allowing us the time and space to have a candid discussion about this now. And hopefully we can get to a point of providing a recommendation, but my suggestion would be like, let's listen to the feedback from the rest of our group before we make that decision on whether we can vote tonight or not. And happy to answer any questions in terms of process, if you're unclear, what's happening next, where we are, both from an Hrec perspective as well as where council is as well. I think we can entertain any questions for those who haven't had an opportunity to follow as closely since things are moving quickly.
And I think that an important note is that what currently is happening is city council is considering drafting code around time, place, and manner specifically, not addressing community members who are experiencing houselessness. This isn't meant to be a solution. This is the point that they're making is they're really focusing in on these three elements of time, place, and manner. And so that's what the current 4 recommendations from HREC are, to kind of center policy development around primary community members. So our community members who are currently experiencing houselessness. And to ensure that all of this work is happening through an equity lens, and that there's an equity analysis applied to this process before making any final decision, and to adjust the timeline as needed, to allow for thoughtful community input to happen, again, engaging with folks who this policy is going to impact the most, and commit to a value of housing as a human right.
I think the questions that I'm hearing, and I'm trying to make sure that I understood Manoj correctly. So I think you gave feedback basically to the question of, are we ready to vote on this as a recommendation to put before city council? I just want to make sure I'm understanding that. Are you suggesting that we're not ready quite yet?
I would just like feedback from those who haven't had an opportunity yet.
Okay, but if we are able to vote and say, we've received this feedback and we want to vote on this with this feedback incorporated, do you feel like we're ready for that tonight?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
He has his hand up, and
Yes, I saw Jody. Jody, you are up next.
Thanks. Thank you. Just a question on item number 3. Are we suggesting but unable to share yet what that adjusted timeline might be? And the reason for my question is the public comment that was offered, and then this conversation. I'm wondering if there's specificity around what are we looking to adjust the timeline to? Is there a recommendation on that? Thank you.
Maybe I can answer, Jody, and maybe it's not necessarily a good answer. But I think that what we're trying to do with this recommendation is make council aware that rather than creating a code to sweep people, we're encouraging them to create a code to make safe havens for our house neighbors that don't have spaces to go. That's why number 2, it's about council striving to provide a safe space. Now, to adjust the timeline, which is your question, they have a timeline for voting on the draft code. And that is very, very soon in the next couple of months.
I think they want to vote by November.
So that's the timeline. But if council takes a recommendation of looking at providing spaces where people can shelter in a time, place, and manner that upholds the humanity of all, then the city will have to create a timeline for themselves in collaboration with unhoused neighbors that should be leading this work.
I think ultimately, and maybe we need to be more explicit, I would say, we're saying, do not push this forward until you have spoken and done community input from your houseless community who will be the most impacted. 2, until you've actually found a replacement for the interruptions that you're going to make.
Thank you. That was the purpose for my question of like, yeah.
There, because I know that's I know that's what it's saying, but I feel like based on our feedback from our guests as well, that we need to make sure that everyone understands that is what we're saying. City council should not move forward until they have put these two goals have become a reality.
So a couple things. I agree, and I'm happy to, if you all decide you want to move forward with a vote, you can put that in a way where once the language reflects the what you just said, and I can make those edits and have those out to you all. I think the other thing to note here, an important context, is that this is not meant to be the only opportunity for HREC to be involved in this process. We have a council liaison that does attend meetings and meets regularly with our other council liaison to provide input on that. I'm a part of the internal kind of work group. So for example, in response to kind of some of the language in this recommendation, the city is currently drafting questions and partnering with community partners who provide services to ask them to incorporate those, as well as looking at what other engagement strategies that we can elevate current lived experience. And then the other thing is that this is really meant to be a high level. HREC would like to see these things happen. I think the conversation around logistically, how do you get there and how do you do that engagement meaningfully, is what comes that next week at the council meeting, is what comes in September when council will be engaging in further conversations with, there's one specifically for advisory committees. HREC is a part of that and on the agenda for that one. So all of those the details are being finalized. And I think this is your original or kind of initial thing for those conversations to come afterwards, where you dive deeper into how HREC would like to be involved moving forward too.
You should look at this recommendation as an opportunity to establish our stance and our thought process and our position ongoing. We will find other ways to dig deeper and to find other places, strategic places to insert ourselves. But ultimately, the beginning letter, the initial recommendation letter, is about establishing our voice and popping up. We're here. This is what we think, and this is what we'll continue to think as we show up everywhere. And so that's why that's what my concern is as far as tabling this, that we make sure that everyone feels good. We adjust the language. We make sure that we understand what we're putting forward as a commission, but that we get that done today, because time is of the essence from what I'm understanding.
You have 2 hands up.
Lovely. Sandra.
Thank you. I really appreciate what Jody is saying. And I think too, listening to what both Mike and Chris have shared, I'm in agreement that something with point 3 could be more vague. I just drafted quickly to change it to allow for thoughtful community engagement and not move forward with a city council vote until or unless an appropriate and thorough equity analysis has been conducted. So it takes and removes away the time notion of it.
Thank you very much, Cassandra. We appreciate that. We appreciate you using your experience and your professional background to help us out there.
No problem.
Drop it in the chat.
We don't have chat available, but Cassandra, if you can email that to me.
Absolutely.
I will replace what currently is highlighted with.
Thank you, Cassandra. That's much better.
Is this our mayor? Okay.
This is our mayor, Jenna.
Go ahead, Mayor.
Oh, we can't hear you.
We have mute on for sure.
She has mute on now.
Okay.
She had it off, but I think it might be an issue with the headphones. I'm not sure.
We can hear you, Jenna.
Yeah, her batteries are out. From her.
Oh,
Her AirPods. Okay, yep.
we can hear you.
Well, not anymore.
Still can't hear you. Can you
We
hear
can
me?
hear you. But
You can hear me now.
it was just-
Yes. I'm sorry, everybody. That was a lot of delay for me just to say that this is a really good time for us to have your feedback, and I really appreciate that you're working on this. So just to encourage you on, this is a great time for this type of feedback. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's. Okay. Oh my gosh. Okay, so here's the deal. Let's vote. And so I'm putting forward. I'm putting forward that. Can I get a motion and a second for us to vote on this being our recommendation to the city concerning their unsanctioned camping code with the alterations and language that Cassandra has provided to our director, Anna? Can I get a second? And can I get?
Second.
I'm sorry, can I get a motion and a second? Thank you. All right, so let's vote. All in favor of this recommendation, say aye or raise your hand.
Unanimous.
All right, it's done. Congratulations, Human Rights and Equity Commission. All right, we have 10 minutes to, I will just say this, for agenda setting, if you have something that you want to see on the agenda for next month, send it in an email. What do we want to do about our Envision Bend folks?
Yes, we have Laura Fritz here. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Laura, if you have slides, I did allow you to share. If it's more of a conversation, that's totally fine. I did share some materials in advance of this conversation, but just as a little bit of background, council has asked HREC to engage in kind of reviewing a current funding request coming from Envision Bend. And now's a time for information gathering, and that recommendation is likely going to, I would recommend that it comes further into September to council. So I'll turn it over to you, Laura, to just kick it off.
Okay, can you all hear me? Great. Okay, thanks. And I do assume Chairwoman Jasmine, hello, that you end on time. And so I should make some adjustments to my presentation, I assume, so that you can adjourn on time, I take it?
That would be wonderful. And I don't know if we can potentially.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll do my best. And I really did want this to be able to be a dialogue and an opportunity for questions and so on. And so, however, I did have about a 10-minute kind of background presentation because I'm really not familiar with how many people know in detail what the Bend Vision Project is and the depth of work we've already done in the community and the support that we've already received from the city of Bend. So I'm going to kind of rush through that information because I want to leave the space for us to, for you to ask questions and so on and figure out where we go from there.
And Laura, I was just going to say, I agree as far as that goes, but we also have received a pretty clear timeline and understand what is being accomplished. So,
okay, terrific.
So
terrific.
Yeah, I mean, I think context is good, but also know that we are working with some solid background information.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to quickly frame the project, and I'll try to jump through my comments and then leave that space. So thank you for having me. I'm Laura Fritz. I am the executive director of Envision Bend. Envision Bend is the nonprofit that is managing the Bend Vision project. And of course, the purpose of the project is to create a long-range vision for our community that describes our desired destiny in 10 or 20 years down the road. And so this is a huge public engagement process. We've been working on this project for about, I think we're 8 months into it. So we're about a little more than halfway through. It probably will be an 18-month project. And so we anticipate wrapping it up by the middle of 2023. When it's all said and done, we will have in our, technically the deliverables are a statement of our core community values, a written document that describes our long-range community vision, organized by priority areas that have risen to the surface through the community input about what our community wants to work on. And then also a 5-year action plan, which really describes the strategies that we're going to take on for the first several years of implementation to try to start marching towards that vision. Let's see, when we first started this project, we provided the City Council with what we called an equitable engagement framework that we have used all along our process in working on this project. And that framework really called for inclusive, transparent, and collaborative engagement. And it also really called on us to continually work on learning and then adapting our process to meet the needs of engagement in our community. And so we really have tried to abide by that model. And hopefully through questions, maybe I can share some examples of how we've adapted, learned, and so on. But just a little more background. The project is designed to gather input from the community in a variety of different ways. And I was listening a little bit to your community input process discussion earlier. And so I was really interested in hearing that. I'll tell you a little bit about that part. But we are interviewing people. We're holding focus groups, what we call listen and envision sessions. We have a public survey. We're doing public presentations. We're meeting people where they're gathering. We're really trying to employ a lot of different strategies to get out into the community, be where people already are, work with trusted partners in the community to reach specific segments of the community to encourage them to engage in this project. And when we go out to the community and ask for their input for this long-range vision, we're asking a series of similar questions all the time. We're asking, what do you value the most about our community? What do you think are our biggest challenges as a community? What big ideas do you have that would have a long-term positive impact on our community, and so on. So we're asking similar questions across communities, but in our focus groups, we sometimes do more specific questions for that particular target audience who we're speaking with. We've done about 60 interviews with individual interviews with community leaders, with community connectors. 25% so far of those interviews are from the BIPOC community. As I mentioned, we're working with key partners who have trusted relationships in the community to reach, frankly, folks who Envision Bend maybe doesn't have deep relationships with. We understand that by working with organizations that have those trusted relationships and really know their communities, they are a better endorser and potentially a platform to encourage people to have their voice heard in this important community initiative. And if you have questions about that, I was gonna talk quite a bit about that, but I'm gonna move on. Our survey is out. It's out in Spanish. It's out in English. It's on our website. You can take it on your phone. You can take it by paper. You can take it on a computer. We've already had 1,500 people take the survey. It's going to stay open for a couple more months because we got to get out there and get as many people as possible to take it. But we'll be watching the demographics of that survey because we do want it to reflect the diversity in our community. And so if we're seeing that the engagement, the survey completions are not really representative of what our population looks like, we will target our outreach more so to get at those communities, because we want those voices as part of this process. Attending community events, I guess I don't need to go into that too much, but we're having booths, we're going out into the community, happy to answer questions. I do want to make a couple quick comments on inclusion. I mean, I know that your focus is equity and inclusion, and so I really need to call out this work, but we are working very hard as a very small nonprofit to have a really robust community engagement process for this project. And one of the things that we have done is we have hired an organization or a group called Oregon's Kitchen Table. They are a program out of Portland State University that is on the cutting edge of DE&I research and work. And their purpose is really to empower Oregonians across the state from every corner of our community to be able to provide feedback to ideas, resources to policymakers, decision makers, important community initiatives like this one. And so OKT we've been working with them from the outset of this project. They've helped us with project design. They've helped us with some of the implementation where we needed specific skill sets and specific expertise. They will continue to be a part of our process design and implementation of the project. We also, big shout out to Xavi Borja. We've been working very closely with Xavi at the city, who's been incredibly helpful, has a lot of insights in helping us test ideas and think of strategies for reaching hard to reach communities, traditionally marginalized communities, and so on. So big thanks to him. And I also want to point out that I mentioned we're working with about 18 different organizations in the community. You got a flyer of who those organizations are, but I'm calling out Latino Community Association in particular because frankly, I don't have the skill set to conduct a survey in Spanish. And so LCA is helping us implement that survey in Spanish. And they also are helping us conduct some focus groups in Spanish as well. So we are working really closely with them. I want to acknowledge there are going to be gaps, and I really welcome your suggestions and input about things maybe we should think about, maybe we should do. But ultimately, we will be taking all the input from the community, creating vision action teams around the priority areas that have been identified by the community engagement. And those vision action teams are going to work with our consultants to help create those the action planning for our 5-year action plan. So our community members are going to sit at the table and work with our consultants to figure out what things should we be working on in the first 5 years of implementation of this project. And that's a huge additional way in the future that we're going to engage the community. We want the BIPOC community to be a big part of that. We welcome your suggestions. Again, we're working with all sorts of folks who can help us design the format of that so that it is equitable and meaningful. So I'm going to stop there. Well, actually, I will talk about money because I know that a question is absolutely going to be about money. The City of Bend has sponsored this project. They provided a sponsorship of $50,000 late in, gosh, I'm losing track. I think it was late 2020 to help us get this project off the ground. At the time that we were asking for support from the city, we said, we're not going to ask for what we'd like to, which is half the cost of this project. We want to show you that, one, we can raise half the cost of this project ourselves, and two, that we can do a really good, fair, equitable, and engaging project. So we have completed our scope of work for the money that the city has already provided us. And so we are due to go back to the city council in later September. I think it's September 21. We'll be asking for $80,000. That represents slightly less than half the cost of the project. The project, not including any Envision Bend staff time or any Envision Bend operational costs. This is purely the costs of the project, will be about $265,000. And it really is going to the consulting groups that we're working with, cost to support OKT participating in this project, cost to provide fees to partners who are helping us implement the project, fees for booths, fees for rental space, translation, etc. They are direct vision project costs. So I'm going to pause there. I have more comments about that. I'd love to explore that, but I don't want to use all the time talking. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much for sharing that. Do any commissioners have any questions? This would be the time for further clarification, for understanding around implementation and budget, maybe.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing. I actually had a chance to work with students at OSU Cascade. It's so exciting to see that OSU Cascade has young adults studying anthropology and learning this scientific study of humanity and society. So I was wondering, do you have any scientists working with you? Just from my experience, and I am no scientist on this, but the questions in your survey seem to have some embedded opinions in them. So I was wondering if you are working with a scientist who is doing the data analysis.
So we are not working with any scientists. I think that's Joanne. I'm sorry, my picture of the city council chambers is really tiny. So, we do not have scientists. However, the consulting group that we did hire for this project has deep experience envisioning projects and public participation. The next consulting group has done visioning work across the country and even across the world. Having said that, we also knew that we need to do better in community engagement, and we need to bring more voices to the table than just those folks who like to attend a community meeting in the evening because they have the time, the space, the resources, and so on. And so that is a big part of why we brought Oregon's Kitchen Table onto our team. It's also why we regularly consult our partner organizations, and we've been working, as I mentioned, with Zavi at the city to try to cover those issues. We did have the survey questions reviewed by Oregon's Kitchen Table, and in our focus groups, I mentioned we're asking similar questions in focus groups, but in our focus groups where we will be having targeting some core audiences, we will have a couple Latino community focus groups, Black community, seniors. There's a long list. We'll probably have 20 to 25 listen and envision sessions. We are working on developing questions for those specific communities as well, maybe 1 to 2 specific questions. And we've been working with OKT on that.
Could I have a follow-up question? Laura, if you are contracting Oregon Kitchen Table, would it be a good idea for the city of Bend to contract directly with Oregon Kitchen Table?
I don't know the answer to that question, frankly.
But if we wanted to, okay, City of Bend invested on this because we want to have some information. So if the City of Bend wanted to have this information, we can get it from multiple sources, right? Like there's this nonprofit and there are many others doing this kind of work. So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, so OKT does not do visioning public participation processes per se. Their role is really trying to bring the voices of historically marginalized communities to the table for important initiatives that are going on across the state. And so it's not, visioning is, it's an art, and there's probably a bit of science to it as well. But so that's not their expertise in particular. So they're just, the next consulting group is our primary consultant for this project. They're managing it, overseeing it. They're the bulk of the cost of this project.
Oh, I saw Manoj, sorry.
Manoj, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Laura, for the thoughtful overview of the work that you're doing. I appreciate that. I know we didn't give you a ton of time. I have two questions for you. What marginalized communities would you say are currently underrepresented in your efforts? And then with that, how might you access or reach those audiences? So that's one whole question. And then the second question is, it sounds like you're doing some qualitative listening sessions. How, if you have new topics or issues that are uncovered in the qualitative listening sessions, how do they then get incorporated in the quantitative survey instrument?
So we're not undertaking our full analysis of the data until we've conducted both the listen and they're kind of parallel process in terms of gathering the data, but the analysis will happen afterwards. And so when new information comes to the table, it will get integrated along with the survey. One doesn't trump the other, because what this project is not about finding what most people like. It's not a majority decision type of project. It is a project that is exploring what are the most important things in general, these themes across our community, where we need to put more attention and more work to create a better future for our community. Then we go into what are the ideas of how we can do that, and what's already being done. Our purpose is not to reinvent the wheel or recreate the same kind of work, but what things can complement or add to and make better in these various areas of priority. And so I think I answered your second question first. The qualitative information, there is qualitative information on the survey as well. We asked a number of open-ended questions, and so it will all be analyzed together in one. I say one fell swoop. We're looking at it, we're trying to tease out what are the main themes that are coming out already, but that can change as we get more input. Regarding your first question, we are paying attention to our survey demographics in particular right now. I'd say we're maybe halfway through implementation of the survey, maybe not even quite that. We expect to have it open until the end of October, I believe. And at this point, we're noticing that we need more young people and more renters to participate. That doesn't surprise us. That's a harder to reach audience frequently on surveys. And so we, as a board, and with our consultants as well, are having discussions about different ways that we can reach those audiences. We're going to do a little more in the next couple of weeks on social media, because that's an easier way to reach younger folks. We have partnerships with OSU Cascades and with COCC. So we'll explore all sorts of ways that we can try to bring up the engagement in those areas. It's early days, though. We knew right away that it would be difficult to reach the Spanish-speaking community, and so we enlisted the support and help of Latino Community Association right away, because we wanted to make sure that Spanish speakers absolutely had the opportunity to weigh in on the survey and not wait till the last minute. We knew that was going to be a hard to reach community.
Okay, yes, we have one more question.
I'm sorry. Laura, the question is, oh no, actually this question is for Megan. Megan, what does the city want from Envision Bend? Why are we investing on it? What is the goal?
Well, I mean, this is a project that is going to do something that sometimes the city can't do. This is my view. The city can't do a visioning project like this as a city. And so being able to have an organization that is going out there and is doing all of this work to really, like Laura said, tease out these themes of where do we want to be? What are the main issues that are affecting our city? I think that's the value of this. And I think really understanding What are some places where we can be, moving forward in this work? What are some, what are some gaps in what we're doing as a city? That's my view of this project.
Thank you.
May I add a couple comments, or have we run over too long already?
We have in fact ran over. I think that what we need to do at this time is, if commissioners have further questions, both for Megan as far as city goals, and then for Laura as far as how this is all going to go and be rolled out, I think that's what would have to happen at this time. And then if there's an opportunity for engagement outside of a meeting, because I don't think we have time for engagement anywhere outside of this meeting, then let's put that forth and get that done via email. My only final thought was just, is there a way that if we're doing all this community listening, is there a way that part of this can be financed or incorporated into the community listening we're supposed to be doing right now? As far as, we would still be the executing part of this, but is there like some sort of partnership, data sharing, asset sharing situation that is viable? I'll just put that out there and let you guys ruminate.
We have OSU's case right here that the city should use
For funding?
no, for looking into public opinion, but that's for the-
Okay, well, we will go back and forth on that, I think, via email. Thank you guys so much. This was a wonderful meeting, highly productive. Thank you, Laura, for coming and sharing Envision Ben's vision and project. We appreciate it.
Thank
All
you.
right, this meeting is officially adjourned. Do not forget to send in agenda items if you have thoughts about our agenda for September. Thank you also.